Hey guys, welcome back to Jessin Reads Romance. I'm Jessin, and today I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read in March, which is not a lot. We'll get into why a little bit later, but I really did start off March strong. I had arcs that I wanted to read, I had new releases that I wanted to read, I was on top of my game when it came to starting my Patreon vlog, so I was feeling like really great at the beginning of March. And then about halfway through, I just hit this wall, and suddenly I just did not want to pick up books anymore, which is a strange thing, and I won't say that it's never happened to me before because I know that it has, and in hindsight I think that a lot of just like general anxiety pretty much contributed to me just not wanting to pick up any new books. The only books that I reread during the last half of March were Immortals After Dark, and that was only sparingly because I have all of them on audio. They're very easy access, and that's pretty much the only books that I read towards the end of March. Yeah, I mean, sometimes it happens. It happens to me, it happens to other people, and instead of trying to like force myself to keep picking up new books in, I knew it wasn't a book slump. It's not the same. I don't feel like it was the same as a book slump. It wasn't me just feeling like I had picked up a bunch of books that I didn't like and now I was just like, oh, where are all the good books in the world? It was mostly just anxiety not allowing me to get lost in a book, because usually books are the place where I go to, you know, escape the everyday life, have a little breather, have some relaxation, you know, when I'm done with school and doing all that stuff during the day. Books are usually my go-to. And during that time when the anxiety was so high, it just did not do the trick. So I did not read a lot of books in March, but I will be talking about the books that I did read. It's very interesting because I feel like I read these books like so long ago, but it hasn't been that long. But we'll kick it off with the first book that I picked up in March, which was The Counterfeit Scoundrel by Lorraine Heath. I have been anticipating this. It is a first book in a new series. I really like the cover of it as well. It kind of reminds me just like of like, I don't know, it's like very colorful. I like the very colorful, you know, historical romances that are coming out. The historical romances that are still kind of doing traditional couple covers, which are my fave. But I was very excited by the premise, and I will say that I was very let down by the execution of this book. Now, I do remember, I think that Crystal said that this is not a direct spinoff, but it does have ties to another one of her series. Lorraine Heath is known to do this. She does Next Gen series, or there'll be like one character that shows up in one series, and then once that one's completed, once all of the siblings have met their match or whatever, then they'll move on to that one character and do kind of a spin-off series. So it's kind of adjacent, you know? And it's not that I had to read another series to really understand this series, but I did feel like one of the drawbacks of The Counterfeit Scoundrel was that it felt like I was jumping into the middle of a story and not really getting to know the characters. So the whole series title is The Chessmen, Masters of Seduction, and our hero does have these friends, and they all have nicknames to do with like chess pieces. Our hero's nickname is Bishop, okay? And I was waiting for the connection. I was waiting for the connection of like, what does chess have to do with any of this? And there's only a very small like instance or reference to chess throughout the whole book, and it's just that Bishop plays chess in his bedchambers with some women. But like, I don't understand how his whole friend group got that name, and I might have missed it, and you can totally tell me down in the comments if I did miss it, but like, I was just missing that whole connection. And maybe I did have a little bit of expectations because Eloisa James did have a very big chess theme in her Desperate Duchess series. Chess was an extremely important like element to the entire series, each person's story. Like, chess was such a big deal, and I don't know, I thought that it was going to be a bigger deal, and I don't know, it just felt like they had nicknames for nothing. It was just weird. It was just weird. Now, getting into the setup of the story, our heroine is a maid in Bishop's household, a new maid that he's never seen before, and she says her name's Daisy, and he figures out that her real name is Marguerite because she doesn't look just like a daisy. What's really happening here is Marguerite is actually a sleuth. She's been hired by someone's husband to basically prove that Bishop is having an affair with his wife. And Bishop has a reputation of having affairs affairs with married women. What society doesn't know is that Bishop is doing this on purpose, is giving women a reason for grounds for divorce, because it's easier for a man to divorce his wife than it is for a woman to divorce her husband, because she has to have more evidence as to why she should get a divorce, and the man does not have to have that much evidence. He just needs to really want to, you know, divorce his wife in one instance of like, oh, a breath of an affair, like it's done. So he's helping out these women, and he has internal motivations as to why he does this thing. And Daisy has no idea what his motivations are. She just thinks that he's a philanderer. So her job is to insert herself into his household and basically catch him in the act so that she can bring the proof back to her client. And the way that their first interaction went immediately kind of like put me on the back foot, because it almost felt like insta lust / love. He was just like, I'm so intrigued by her. I've never seen this woman before in my life, but she is the most stunning woman I've ever seen in my life. It felt so fast, and like he was obsessed with her from jump. And I was just like, that's not enough for me. I thought that maybe this close proximity situation, her working for him, would allow for there to be like a development of real feelings, but I don't think that Lorraine Heath did that very well. I don't think that she gave me a reason to believe that this couple had any more between them than just lust, and their interactions are just, I don't know, they were not very interesting. And that's kind of insane to say, because there are some bonkers things that actually go on here. And this is just my personal opinion, I don't think that Lorraine Heath like fleshed out the story well enough, and she just needed action to happen, so she was throwing stuff at the story, but it didn't feel really cohesive to me. So it was a pretty big letdown. His friends rarely made an appearance. I didn't understand their friend group. Like they hung out like once at a club, and they all called each other by their little chess nicknames, and I'm like, for why? Tell me, I need a reason. And I don't know, I just didn't feel like I sympathized with Bishop's reasoning, but also it just wasn't compelling to me. And then we have Marguerite's backstory, which kind of came out of left field toward the end of the book, and I was just kind of like, I didn't care. I did not care. Lorraine Heath did not give me enough during the course of the story to care about them as individuals or as a couple. So for that reason, I didn't give it a very high rating. I gave it a solid 3, because it wasn't like the worst book I've ever read, and it was like the actual like writing element of it, there's nothing technically wrong, but just there was no emotion for me. There was no investment for me, which is why I want to read a book. So it's not going to be, you know, something that I would recommend for other people. Next, I was lucky enough to get an arc of Mafia Target by Mila Finelli, and I was so excited about this one because we had a teaser at the end of Mafia Madman, and I was so excited about Alessio being paired with Giulio. Giulio is a son of a mafia don, but he is living under, you know, a fake name because he's gay, and the mafia really doesn't tolerate homosexuality. So his father basically said, I'd rather you live, you know? And Giulio, it's not like he doesn't see his family. He does go visit quite often, and he's trying to make a name for himself. He actually, interestingly enough, because in the earlier books in the series, he was very just kind of like, I don't want to be in charge of all this stuff. He was young, I will say. I think he was 18 the first time that we meet him, and it's a little bit down the line, but he's kind of like starting his own empire in Mafia Target. And his hero is actually an assassin hired to kill him. He's a hitman. And I love the moment where we're in Alessio's head, because in a previous book, Alessio was actually originally hired to kill Giulio's father. And Alessio is like this renowned sniper. He never misses. And that's why he's paid the big bucks. And we're in his head in the scene that we've actually already been privy to in Mafia Darling. Mafia Mistress? Which one's first? Second? I think it's Mafia Darling. And in Alessio's mind, he had the perfect shot lined up for Fausto to kill him. He was going to absolutely kill Fausto, but he was distracted because of Giulio. And Alessio is bisexual, so he had never been so enamored before. So yeah, we do have a case of insta-lust, but like it works in this slightly dark romance because from then on, Alessio's been obsessed with Giulio. And this obsessiveness kind of makes him into a stalker. So he's had opportunity to kill Giulio to fulfill his end of the bargain, because since he didn't kill Fausto, his new mission, his new target is Giulio, because the man who hired him is just like, instead of killing Fausto, it'll hurt him worse if you kill his son. So do that. So Alessio, the teaser that was in the back of Mafia Madman, where Alessio enters a nightclub. He's been observing Giulio for, weeks now. And he has this MO where he goes to the club, he picks a random dude, and he brings him to a dark room, lets him give him a blowjob, and then immediately leaves. Well, Alessio decides, I'm gonna do that. And I love the moment after Giulio and Alessio hook up where his father calls to warn him, like, hey, it hits out on your life. You need to come home. Here's a picture of the hitman after you, and he realizes that's the guy that he just hooked up with, and he was like, oh my god. So like he keeps going under different assumed names and going to different countries, and Alessio keeps finding him, like this stalkerish thing. I love it so much. And it's very much it's almost captive because like Alessio kind of corners him at a certain point, and Giulio has to think, because he's like, okay, he could have killed me, but he hasn't. So like I need to figure out like what's going on. Like he wants to hook up with me. Like, do I need to get an opening? I need to like cozy up to him so that I can kill him before he kills me. And so it's very like tense, but also humorous at the same time. I just think that Mila Finelli does a really great job of bringing that balance to the book. It's dark, it's gritty, it's sexy, it's fun, and I really did love it. So I gave that one 4.5 stars. It wasn't quite my favorite in the series. Mafia Madman is still up there, and I actually still like Frankie and Fausto's story a little bit more, to be honest, but it was solid. I mean, I just think Mila Finelli is awesome at creating these bonkers dark romance plots, and I can't wait for the next one. Okay, next are the two books that I read for my Patreon vlog. The first book was Axel by Lola Wright. It's the second book in a motorcycle romance series. It's like the Devil's something series. The Devil's Angels MC series. Now, if you're looking for a lighthearted MC romance that the heroes respect women and they really don't have that like overall condescending view of women, then this one's good. Now, it wasn't a good book, and I wouldn't recommend it because I think that the writing is very poor. I think that it needs polishing. It needs a lot of polishing. This is like a first time, it feels like a first time writer. And there was lots of little things that kind of added up that just made it not an enjoyable read for me. And the length of the book did not match the intensity of the plot because the plot was so low angst. Even though, okay, maybe I should set up the story first before I get into the nitty gritty about like the writing style and like what I really disliked about it. The heroine, Bailey, is an accountant, and she stumbles upon this account that she knows something's going on, and she decides to inform her boss, like, hey, I know something shady's going on with this account. Like, I don't want to be part of it. And the boss is like, okay, well, now that you know my secret, he kind of threatens her, and then the criminal, organization that the account is for, they start like being like, oh, is she gonna talk? Like, we need to do something about it. So her life is in danger. They do come after her. They corner her in an alleyway, and they're like about to beat her, like they start to, and they're interrupted by this man, and she ends up by running into the street and running into a guy on a motorcycle. Now, they say that he must have been going slow, and he must have been really going slow for her to run into him, and like neither of them were hurt. This is the hero, Axel, and his motorcycle club basically takes a shine to Bailey, and they are offended that somebody would beat on a woman, and they're like, we're gonna watch over you from now on. From then on, Bailey kind of has this found family moment. She was raised by a woman who is very mature, very childish, very about herself, and at a young age she knew that she was gonna have to take on like the parents' responsibility, paying bills, making the money, doing all that. She still takes care of her mom. Her mom is like this free spirit. She's like kind of like a nudist. She drinks wine and smokes pot all day. Like, that's all she does. And she feels an obligation to take care of her mom, but she's tired. She's tired of taking care of her mom, which I would be too. So Bailey has problems. They know where she lives. She has no protection, and she's out of a job. The problem with the plot is that just associating with the motorcycle club solves all her problems. They have an apartment for her to stay in with very little rent. They give her a job, and somebody is always there protecting her at her apartment. So like all of the immediate danger is immediately wiped away. They're so wholesome and loving that you're immediately just like swept into like this sweet kind of romance, and it wasn't very insta love. I will say that's something that the author did pretty well is they didn't just fall into bed together, or there wasn't like this immediate like absolute attraction, must bang them, you know, now. It was a little bit more gradual, but I never felt the danger, the true danger, never felt it. There was that one instance in the beginning when she was attacked, and there was a couple of other instances throughout the book where these random thugs would try to get at her, but then they would not succeed because the motorcycle club was there to protect her. So there was no tension, and also the bad guy was pretty faceless. So like there was not like a man behind the curtain to like really make me feel like this was a horrible organization that like they better prepare because war is coming and they're gonna get Bailey come what may. It just wasn't there. There was a tension with her mom, but that was only like brought in towards the end, really. So it was just too long for the lack of plot. It was just her finding out that these motorcycle men were super fun and easy to get along with, and she now had a good job and she started to have some girlfriends and stuff like that. But that's basically it. That's all that went on. And that coupled with the writing was just, I did not like it. There was multiple instances during that vlog where I, you know, pieced out pieces of dialogue that I was just like, this is just so cringy and so clunky. And the author had a tendency to write very long paragraphs of dialogue. Like I'm talking like 1 and 2 pages. And my Kindle, like the size of my words is very small on my Kindle. And the fact that this dialogue went on with 0 breaks, like 0, there was no movement. It was just talk. That's it. They were talking, and I couldn't stand it. I would say that the writing felt a little bit more juvenile. Like it was just very simple, but too simple in a way that there just needs to be more development in craft and writing. And then maybe I'd try her out in a couple of years. And I don't know if this author has been writing for years already and this is just her style and she's never going to change and she's never had a reason to try to develop her writing, and this is fine. Some people like that, but I definitely do not. So there was that. Axel, I gave it 2 stars, I think. Okay, I gave it 2.75 stars because it wasn't it was bad. I'm sorry, it was. Then I read Rootbound by Tara DeWitt, which I loved Funny Feelings last year by Tara DeWitt. I think that she has a really great writing style, and the first chapter was so immediately engrossing because our heroine, Tate, she has been married for years, and this first chapter is so gut-wrenching. Like I felt her pain so much. Her husband out of nowhere asked her for a divorce. And I think the way that Tara DeWitt writes Tate's feelings about divorcing her best friend was so raw. Like I teared up in the first chapter and I was just like, oh my God. Like, I don't know. I was just immediately put in Tate's position, her shoes. How would I feel? And like, she describes it so well, that rawness, that like, I don't understand what's happening. And then we have the double whammy that he actually leaves her for one of their friends. And we find out more about how that relationship kind of developed because Tate later on in the book kind of reflects on when he initially told me. I had no idea. But now looking back on it, I can see where it would have happened. And that was very interesting to me. So anyway, I was like fully on, like I was like, holy shit, this girl is going through a lot, especially because she has this past kind of trauma that she was dealing with. His family became her family. She was so close to his family, and by divorcing her, he took that away from her. Not on purpose. Like he was just like, you can still talk to my mom and dad. And she did for a while, but it becomes painful because they have to, you know, welcome his new wife and they're building their lives together. So anyway, we have a time jump after that. Tate's job is this photographer, and she has this client. It's an author who hires her to basically go scope out scenes so that this author can write the book. And Tate has a theory that this author is agoraphobic, and so, you know, Tate is author's lifeline. And after a night of taking wedding pictures, which she normally doesn't do anymore, but she took wedding pictures as a favor to a friend of her sister. She gets really drunk. She missed a lot of calls from her boss and messages from the author. She accepts the job without looking into it more. And when she realizes that she has actually accepted a job taking pictures at this ranch. And it's not just any ranch. First of all, I like that it wasn't super obvious but you can totally tell that this was kind of like a little nod to Yellowstone, that this real ranch was being shot at for a very popular TV show about like cowboys and stuff. Her job was to go down there at the ranch and take pictures of the wildlife and ranch life and all that jazz. And what's special about this ranch is it actually belongs to her estranged dad. This is where her past trauma comes in. Her and her sister have lived with their mom for years, and when their parents got divorced, moved out of state to go be by her parents in California, by the mom's parents in California, and the dad never made contact with them again until recently. I think until Tate was 18, where she started actually getting letters. Her sister, her younger sister, actually is the person that even writes back the dad at all. The sister seems more receptive to maybe a reconciliation, but Tate's just kind of like, you abandoned me. You absolutely abandoned me. Why should I give you a chance? So Tate has a lot of feelings about her father, and she feels very abandoned, which is also what makes the divorce so much more raw and emotional. Now she's taken this job where she has to confront her family. She has aunts and uncles. She knows through some letters that her sister has kind of like told her about, that they have a half brother who she's never met before, and she has to go there for a job. And of course, there's this man who he made like a guest appearance on the show. He was just an extra in the background, but like everyone called him like the Viking cowboy or whatever, the hot Viking, because he was in the background. And he's actually a real ranch hand on the actual ranch, and his name's Henry. He kind of has like the Rip background, I would say. Like, he was taken in by Tate's family, so he's very protective of Tate's family. He knows that they're two estranged daughters, but he doesn't know that Tate is that daughter when he picks her up from the airport. I really like their first exchange. Henry actually figures out who Tate is on the way to the ranch. Like, he figures it out, and I like how it's a interesting puzzle for Henry, especially with what he had gone through, because he has some past trauma that makes him mistrustful of newcomers, especially women. So I like their relationship. I loved how it developed. They have, kind of a forced proximity situation going on. I like how it's more frenemies. It's not really enemies. They kind of got off on the wrong foot. So they become friends. I love the way that Tara DeWitt writes Tate and her interactions with her family. Interactions with her half-brother, her stepmother, her father eventually, as well as her grandmother too. So loved this story. I thought it was really, really great. I gave it 4.5 stars. Honestly, since I'm doing Storygraph, it probably should be 4.75 stars. Like, it was almost a full 5 stars. Yeah, I am gonna go change that rating. I'm gonna go change that rating to 4.75 stars. The next book that I picked up, this was for the 12 Friends Challenge, and it's Forever After All by Catherine Amara. First time reading this author. I know that a lot of people really love her books. Cheyenne actually messaged me saying that, she really loves Catherine Amara. Unfortunately, I did not like this book. I actually just had to go read the synopsis to Forever After All, because though I keep track of character names in my Airtable, I didn't write any notes at all for my Airtable, probably because I just did not like this book very much. But I was just like, what even happened in this book? So reading the synopsis, a couple of things came back to me, and I do know why that I gave it such, a harsh rating, I guess you would say. This is a billionaire marriage of convenience romance, and the heroine Elena, she is the younger daughter of this very wealthy family. She has an older brother who she used to be close to. Her mom is in a coma in the hospital, and she's been in a coma for a long time. Her dad has since remarried to this wicked stepmother figure, and the whole family is kind of turned against her because she's still loyal to the mom. She still takes care of the mom. The dad had the, mom legally declared dead, even though she's not dead. Alexander, the hero, has a problem with the brother, because the brother, her brother, Elena's brother, is now with Alexander's ex-fiance. So Alexander hates the brother, and he and Elena have a chance meeting. They used to know each other because Alexander and the brother used to actually be close until this whole thing. So they have a chance meeting, and later on he figures out who she is. She needs money desperately to keep up with the care of her mom. Her dad absolutely refuses in the most villainous monologue-y type of way. Like, that's one of the the things that I hated about this writing style is the villains are so mustache twirly villainous. Like, they are just the most evil, mean girl, rich people you've ever read about in your life. And I'm just like, there's no nuance and depth to their characterization at all. Their motivation is literally to be evil and mean. Like, that's what they are. And Elena is just good and trod upon. So Elena ends up at this like sex club basically because she's gonna try to make money so that her mom can still have the care that she needs to have. It costs a lot of money. So she's gonna sell her body, but Alexander is there. He's since found out who she is, but he's also mad because he's like, nobody else is gonna touch her. So then he comes up with this whole marriage of convenience plot, and he agrees to pay for her mom and stuff like that. And they basically move her out of the hospital and into a private wing and having her own nurses, doctors, all that jazz to try to figure out what's going on. And it was just kind of it was very soap opera-y, very like over the top type of drama. And I'm not saying that it's wrong to like that because so many people do. My mom loves watching soap operas. I have never liked watching soap operas. It's almost like reality TV for me in the way that I get almost secondhand embarrassment by like the dramatics of it all. So I just don't like high drama, I guess you would say. It's not angsty, it's just full of dramatics. Over the top statements, over the top characterizations, over the top just situations. And some people thrive off of that. That's what they want in their story. That's what makes a story exciting to them. To me, it just makes me cringe a little. So I ended up by really not liking this book at all. I didn't like their relationship. You could see what happened from a mile away, the conclusion to all of this. And it was just so crazy. And I was just like, no, I don't like it. So yeah, that was a 2.75 star to me. And I feel like that was a little bit generous. Next, I read Things We Hide from the Light by Lucy Score. This is the second book in her Knock 'Em Out series, which I still get a kick out of the city name. It took me forever to realize like that the town was called Knock 'Em Out. I was just reading it, but like my eyes were glazing over when I saw that name. I was just kind of like, yeah, weird town name, it's fine. And then I was like, oh, Knock 'Em Out. And like there's lots of instances where people just kind of like brawl a little bit. It's really funny. Anyway, our hero Nash, he's a cop, and in the previous book he got shot. And he has a little bit of amnesia, mostly to do with that night, and that comes into play. Like, who shot Nash, the motivations, the villain is pretty much the same person from book 1. But I will say the first half of the book really doesn't focus on that part of the plot. The first half of the book is what I loved about the book. It's my favorite part about the book. And it is basically very focused on the situation between Nash and Lena. Lena is best friends with Nash's brother, Knox, from book 1, and she's recently decided to move into town for a little while. She was staying at this gross hotel, and since Knox had won the lottery, he owns lots of property now, and he offers Lena this apartment. It just so happens to be across the hall from Nash. And Nash thinks Lena's pretty hot, but they have like a little bit of like animosity toward each other. Lena is kind of keeping a secret, and it's to do with her work. She is sort of a detective, but I'll keep like exactly what she does like a little bit on the down low so you can discover that for yourself. But I love the tension between Lena and Nash. Nash is trying to push it. He wants to be back to normal, but he's not back to normal. He has PTSD, and I think that Lucy Score did a really good job of like showing Nash's PTSD and how it really has affected his everyday life. And Lena is a big part of him healing because he doesn't want to be vulnerable with his family. He doesn't want to be vulnerable with his brother. They have a contentious relationship already. So Lena becomes that person for him. And I feel like it really develops a true natural relationship between them. They're kind of privy to each other's secrets. They've seen each other's vulnerabilities in the first half of the book by this point, and I thought it was really well done. Now, where I think the book kind of let me down, first of all, it was too long, just like the first book in the series was too long. Like, cut it down, Lucy Score, does not need to be that long. And there was almost a personality transplant that happens toward like the second half of the book, where Nash took on some qualities of Knox. Knox was a grumpy asshole hero, and like Nash has some grumpy tendencies as well, but like all of a sudden he had Knox's personality for a couple situations where Lena was putting herself in danger and he had to like, you know, be like, me man, me protect woman. And I was just like, but that's a Knox bit. Like, Nash didn't need to take on that to, I don't know, I just think that the way that he was talking was exactly how Knox would handle the situation. I was like, it's fine. It worked for you for the first book, but Nash is a different character, and I don't think that it fit well with his character doing that. So I felt like it was a little bit of Lucy Score forcing her hand to make a character do these things to make the Lena and Nash have a conflict. And then we have, to me, the most boring part of the book was actually when the bad guy kind of makes an appearance for the third act conflict. I was just kind of like, I didn't care for it. I was just very bored, and I didn't think it needed to happen. I don't know. I was just like, it could have happened in a different way. It was like very high action, like intensity, like lots of intensity going on, but for some reason I was bored with it because of course I knew everything was going to end up fine in the end, and I don't know. It just didn't feel natural to the story somehow, some way, even though Lucy Score set it up to be like, we know that the villain's out there. We know that Nash had his name on this list of people that apparently they were all had hits out on them, and there was one attempt on Nash's life, so he could still be in danger and all that jazz. Like them as a couple. I think that the second half of the book was a little bit of a slog, and it was mostly because we were really focusing on like the bad guy element and less on like the relationship element. It was still there, but like the first half of the book to me was really great. It was almost perfection. So I gave this one 4.5 stars. I gave it 4 stars because I gave book 1 4.5, and I was like, well, I like book 1 better, so it's 4. So it's 4 star. Woo! I have been long-winded for this video. I'm sorry. Hopefully in editing it will be not quite as long. Okay, the next book that I read was Wicked in His Arms by Stacey Reed. This is a second book in her series Wedded by Scandal. I read the first book, Accidentally Compromising a Duke, like maybe early last year. I'm not exactly sure when, but it's been a while since I read this first book. And it's in Stacey Reed's backlist. I love Stacey Reed. She is one of my favorite historical romance authors, especially her most recent series and her standalones that has started to publish. Those have been some of my favorite historical romances of all time, but going into her backlist, you can really see how much she's grown. So the first book, Accidentally Compromising a Duke, I liked it, but I didn't love it. I had been hearing through the grapevine that the fourth book in this series was something that was definitely worth the read, but me being me, I wanted to read the books in order, so I went back to book 2 where I had, left off. So Wicked in His Arms, we have a heroine, Olivia, who is very like, why are women not afforded the same privileges and opportunities as men type of thing? I think that could be done in a historical romance. But the way that Stacey Reed employs this, I want to be able to do these things that men can do and they don't get critiqued for, very ham-fisted. Because obviously during that time period, there are reasons why they can't do that. There's an example where Olivia, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself, but there's an example where Olivia decides during the middle of the day to go swim in the pond. She has like a Mr. Darcy moment, swim in the pond in her white underwear. The hero comes home and he's like, what the hell are you doing? And she's like, I didn't think anybody's home. Like, there's tons of servants everywhere. Like that, you're naked basically in front of everybody. Like, you can't do that. It wasn't even in a private pond. Like, it was literally, you could see her from the house. She was in the middle of broad daylight, no coverage. She wasn't even trying to be like, I'm just going to swim in a pond, a couple miles away from the house in the shaded area where nobody's gonna probably come. Like, she just like blatantly let me do things that I know that society is going to look down on me for, and then kind of wonder why she gets judged for it. And I don't like that. It's ham-fisted. I'm like, you can't do that during that time period. It's too much modern girl forced into historical setting and modern ideas and stuff like that. It can be done, but this wasn't done well, in my opinion. And then Tobias, the hero, I didn't care for him at all. He's a little bit of an asshole hero. He's very like snooty. Yeah, it was like a kind of very boring book. Her family wanted her to, get like some refinement. So they kind of tricked Tobias's family saying like, she's just, kind of a country girl, but she needs some refinement, but she's like great. But she's not. She keeps doing these things that absolutely offend Tobias's mother. Tobias's mother wants him to marry someone soon, someone who will elevate their status. And of course, he's intrigued by her, they get compromised, they have to marry and all that jazz. But again, boring plot. So I gave that one 3 stars. I didn't care for it quite at all. So I was kind of turned off from the series, and instead of going to book 3 so that I could get to book 4, I was like, I need something totally different. I picked up a Zoe York, Reckless at Heart. I've read Zoe York in the past and I liked it. Small town romance, like that's what she's known for in Canada. And I mean, like all her books are pretty much set in Canada, or at least the ones that I've read. But the reason why I turned to Zoe York was because somebody said book 2 in that series was a firefighter romance, and I was like, oh, firefighter romance. So anyway, again, starting from a series from book 1, that's how I do. And I loved this book so much. This was a surprise because I wasn't even like, I didn't know what it was about. It was a freebie book way back when that I bought and had been chilling on my Kindle for forever. And I picked it up because it was the first in a series and I wanted to get to a later book. Well, it turned out to be a blessing in disguise because this was such an interesting, unique plot, and I love the way that Zoe York wrote it. It is a slow burn, I will say that. So if you don't like slow burns, you probably won't like this. But the way that this book is set up, the hero, Owen, he had a daughter when he was only 18. He and his now ex-wife have been, co-parenting Becca, and she's turning 18. And Owen is very excited because Becca is about to go away to college. He's gonna have the house to himself, and he really hasn't had that much of a bachelor lifestyle. He hasn't really dated that much, and so he's just like, oh, I'm gonna do some things that I wanna do because like my life has always been about Becca, and I'm really glad to be that, strong father figure for her, but like now I can kind of like do things that I wanna do, like turn the extra room into a home gym. I really want that. So anyway, just like he's good in his life, but then his daughter comes home one day and says, Dad, I'm pregnant. And he's like, this is history repeating itself. Oh my God. But he wants to be supportive. And at first he's just kind of like, what the heck? Becca, starts to cry, doesn't want to disappoint her parents. And he's the first parent that she's told, but he has to be the strong dad for her. And he's just like, it's gonna be okay. So now he's revamping what his life is gonna look like for the next 18 years. He's like, okay, my daughter needs me. She's not moving out, obviously, and she's going through this. I'm gonna have to support her through, her pregnancy and, be there for her. Probably gonna have another kid in my house. And so kind of be Mr. Dad all over again because her boyfriend is very immature and he is kind of a little bit of a douchebag. His life completely changes. The heroine of the story is actually Becca's midwife, and they kind of get off on the wrong foot because on Becca's first appointment, first of all, he notices how cute the midwife looks, and he's an extremely grumpy, monosyllabic hero. So first, Carrie, the heroine, the midwife, is judging him because she's like, this guy came in with this girl and he looks way older than her. At first thinks that that's the baby daddy, and then finds out that that's the father. But her business partner lives in Pine Harbor. She's about to move to Pine Harbor as well. So they kind of run into each other a lot. And there's some sexual tension, but it's a slow burn because both of them know that it's inappropriate to start a relationship. At least they both think so, that it's inappropriate to start a relationship when, Carrie is working basically for his daughter. I like the way that the tension develops between them. At first it's just tension, just regular, like almost animosity. Then it turns into sexual tension. And then we start having this vulnerability, this opening up, but then it's also kind of like, oh, we can't. I'm basically working for your daughter, so that's not gonna happen. And there's also more things, obstacles to the relationship. Owen doesn't want to have any more kids, and Carrie has put off having kids because she was focusing on her career, but now she's in her mid-30s and she wants a baby soon. So she's kind of looking for her life partner. And she's interested in Owen, but Owen doesn't really want to have more kids. So that's also something that they have to try to overcome. And I'm always interested how an author handles a couple that have a fundamental difference of like what they want in their life, like kids. It's a really big deal. If you don't want kids, then there has to be a really good reason to change your mind that has you looking at like, oh no, I can see myself having kids now. And vice versa. If you've always wanted kids, there has to be a really good reason why you are like, okay, I don't need kids to satisfy me anymore. And I'm always interested to see how authors handle that. And I think that Zoe York did a wonderful job in wrapping that all up. So I gave this book 5 stars. I thought it was really great. Then I picked up Trial of the Sun Queen by Nisha J. Tooley. And I don't know if I said her name right. Very intrigued by the cover, knew it was a fantasy romance, and I remembered Crystal, like way back when, I say way back when, like maybe in early February, had just mentioned to me, she was just talking about like books that she was thinking about picking up, and especially during Pharaoh Feb, she's like, oh, this is a fantasy romance, and I've heard it's kind of like Raylo vibes or something. So I was like, oh, I love Raylo. Like, I'm gonna download this book. So it was sitting on my Kindle, and I decided to read it during a very long car ride to Atlanta. I was in Atlanta for a wedding. This book, I wish I would have read the synopsis, but it's also really funny that I didn't read the synopsis. I completely guessed the books that the author was drawing inspiration from. Yeah, we'll talk about this. I do want to say before I get into what I think was very wrong with the book and wrong with the author writing this book, but the first chapter was great. It was so great. I was so into it. Very intrigued by this heroine. Her name is Lore, and she's been in this prison since she was 12. This very harsh prison. They don't have enough to eat. They're very weak. They get punished for the smallest things and beaten, and there's, you know, rivalries between the other prisoners and stuff. And like, I thought that first chapter was really great. She gets thrown in to this pit in the beginning. It's a punishment because she ended up by attacking a fellow prisoner because that prisoner, who is like basically her nemesis, stole a piece of soap. And something that she had to degrade herself in order to have this piece of soap. And this other prisoner just stole it from her and then taunted her. And so this rage just came over her. She knew that she would get in trouble for it, but attacked that girl anyway. She gets a harsh punishment. She gets thrown in the pit, and her punishment is for like 2 weeks. No food, no water. She hopes it rains because that's the only way she's getting water, and then she's starving, you know? She can't climb up. There are monsters in the forest that may or may not eat you. Some people never come back from the pit. So I was just like, ooh, this is cool. And then it falls apart from there. That's the only good part about the book was the first chapter. I thought the first chapter was well written, and I thought it set up this like very, very interesting, mysterious vibe. And then it turns into a bunch of other books mashed up together. So overall, I would say that Trials of the Sun Queen is an extremely unoriginal book with plot lines and characterizations that are pulled directly from other books and series, very popular books and series. And the thing about it is the author does not shy away from saying that, hey, if you like these books, then you'll probably like my book. And I'm like, yeah, so these are your inspirations, but the problem is you've not written an original enough story for me to not just think that you're just piecing all these things together because you can't write an original story. That's the way I feel about this book. So I gave it a very low rating. After reading the book, and I was like, it feels a lot like Hunger Games. Not only is it a Hunger Games situation where there are trials that the other candidates die, and some candidates are forced there, some candidates want to be there, but it, like the author says in the synopsis, that it's Bachelor meets Hunger Games, and that's exactly what it is. The competition, the prize is to be the Sun Queen, and so there's this man who is the Sun King, and there are different realms in this world, so he is in charge of one realm. He's not the only king in charge of a realm, and the prize is to be his wife. And it's not just that simple, and there's some other things going on in the background that Lore starts to discover, like this is just a little bit more complicated than just winning a prize at the end, but it's set up to be very ACOTAR. The Sun King is basically Tamlin, and we have this prince who we get his POV only like maybe 4 times throughout the whole book, which that was a whole nother thing. Like, it's a dual POV book, but one POV is very, very minimal. It's very telegraphed that the Sun King is not the hero, because why would we be having this prince's POV? This other prince of another realm. And he's a very Rhysand character. The way that they see each other as well is very, you know, Feyre and Rhysand. It's just blatant. It's so blatant. So after I read the book, and I was just like 2 stars. First of all, the heroine, who was so strong in the first chapter, I felt like she lived such a gritty, like harsh life. The way that she was taken in by this opulence and these pretty words from this man, I just expected her to be a little bit more of a smarter heroine. that was just me. There's also a plot line with like this long lost queen of this forgotten kingdom that, I mean, it's obvious where it's going. It's obvious where this whole series is going. I'm not continuing with this series, obviously, because again, I could basically tell you what's gonna happen. But anyway, I decided to go read other reviews because I was like, is it just me? Is it just me that this is just kind of pretty much copying and trying to say that you wrote an original story, but really you just took elements from other stories and mashed them together and you called this original? And no, I wasn't the only one. And other people actually said that it has elements of Kira Cass's The Selection, which I have never read, which I'm assuming has like Bachelor vibes. And that's where that Bachelor element comes in. So other people named every single book. Obviously the Hunger Games author blatantly says Hunger Games meets The Bachelor, but they said Kira Cass. And in her bio, she says that she's a really big fan of ACOTAR. So I'm just like, you know, so I have a problem. I have a problem with that. Just make an original story. Make an original story. You can still have the same themes and stuff, but like, it's just too similar. It's just too similar. And the tone with having this Bachelor competition compared with the real life struggle that she had experienced since she was 12, like it just was very off for me. Very off for me. 2 stars. Oh man, I forgot. I need to go grab this book. So I read Prince of Dreams, but let me go grab Prince of Dreams. Okay, sorry, I had to go grab this book. So this is my Lisa Kleypas read for the month. And this is one of her older ones. This was published, when was this published? 1995. So this was published in 1995, which is not the oldest historical romance that I've ever read, but it's one of the oldest that I read by Lisa Kleypas. I was unaware that this is apparently the time travel book of Lisa Kleypas's backlist. Like I was unaware, but like when I was telling Crystal about it, she's like, oh, is that the one with time travel? I'm like, you knew there was time travel in here? I didn't know it. And that is the worst, one of the worst parts of this book. This is the first Lisa Kleypas book that I actively despised. I almost DNF'd it. I was like, I don't know if I can do it. But then I kept going because I was like, no, my goal for the year is to read all of Lisa Kleypas's books. And I have to realize that some books that she wrote in the 80s and the 90s are probably not going to land well with me. But I was just very surprised by how much I despise the hero. And I think that took me off guard because in the beginning, I really liked the hero. The heroine, Emma, she is a beloved daughter of a man who wed someone who's Russian. And apparently there is a book that's before here that's the dad's, love story with the stepmom. And Emma has kind of been enamored of her stepmother's kind of cousin, Nicholas. And he is a Russian prince. And he's been exiled from Russia because he's said to be like a traitor or something. So he has past trauma where he was actually tortured. And so he's struggling a lot with that. But in the beginning, Emma thinks that she's in love with this man. And her father has adamant that she's not going to marry somebody who just wants her fortune. Emma is convinced that this guy who she's in love with that does not want her fortune and is really truly in love with her. This actually gives me a lot of Harry and Poppy vibes from her Hathaway series, in that Harry sees Poppy, who's also in love with somebody else, and he's just like, no, that guy's not good enough for her. I want her instead. And that's kind of what Nicholas does. He's like, same, like, she's mine. She's mine. I've just been waiting for her to grow up. So no, you go away. It kind of traps her into a marriage. And he's very charming in the lead up to all that, to them actually marrying. He's very charming with her. She also has a little bit of Beatrice elements as well from the Hathaways again, because she's an animal lover. She likes to rescue these exotic animals and take care of them. And he even loves this about her in the beginning, says that, of course, when they marry, there will be a place for all of her menagerie. He's very rich. He can take care of all of them. So, they get married because he put her in a compromising position. Dad is very pissed about all of this because, again, no, why? My beloved daughter. I like the way that the father is very protective of Emma, but they kind of have a falling out because she blames her father for chasing away her original suitor, which it was actually Nicholas. So it's his fault. And she doesn't know that yet. Their marriage starts off okay, but all of a sudden Nicholas he had such a conviction in the beginning that Emma was his one and only, that Emma was meant to be his. Had this like gut feeling. He marries her, and then he starts treating her like crap because she makes him feel. And I'm like, my eyes were crossed. I was like, what an asshole. Starts like being kind of cruel to her, belittling her. Like, he is actively cruel to her. And I'm just like, what the fuck? Where does this come from? Okay? Where does this come from? It to me came out of left field. I hated the way that Lisa Kleypas characterized Nicholas, because he basically had a personality transplant. And I was like, why did you think that Emma belonged to you if you were going to treat her like crap once she started making you feel things? Like, you obviously had affection for her in the beginning. You knew after seeing her for like the first time that she was always meant to be yours, and now she's yours and you treat her like crap. It's weird. It was so weird. Then we have the time travel element. So this is a bit of a spoiler. So Nicholas is said to be descended from this man. I totally forgot, because like I was so angry at like the twist of this time travel element. Nicholas is descended from this man who is also a traitor to the Russian crown. What triggers the time travel is that Emma is having this painting that she's found in the attic restored. Finally, the face of this portrait is revealed, and it looks exactly like Nicholas, and this is his ancestor. So he sees this and he goes back in time, and now he's in his ancestor's body. Just when he's about to lose Emma, because Emma is done with the fucking bullshit, like she was about to leave, he goes back in time, and his ancestor, might I say, is in the middle of selecting a wife, and all of the women around were gathered around, and he's just about to pick her. And so he just isn't aware that he's time traveling. He thinks he's dreaming at the moment, and then he realizes that he's his ancestor, and he goes along with it. And then he sees a woman who looks exactly like his wife, Emma. And this is also his ancestor, so he picks her. And he's just so excited. He's like, Emma, remember me? And she's like, no, what? My name is Emmeline, or whatever her name is in her past Russian self. And I just can't get over that these are literally his ancestors. Like, he's in the body of his great-great-great-great-grandfather. And he is actively courting his great-great-great-great-grandmother. Nicholas, having the awareness of being Nicholas in the present day, sleeps with his great-great-great-grandmother. And it's too weird for me. And what pains me about this so much is that he would not admit that he was in love with his wife in the present day, but he falls in love with his wife by falling in love with his grandmother, who is not the same person. Not the same person. So when he does come to and comes back to his former body after, sleeping with his grandmother and sacrificing himself so that she can live, so that her unborn baby can then become his great-great-great-great-grandfather, and then eventually he'll be born down the line. So when he comes to, he, realizes he has this come to Jesus thing, like, oh, I actually always have loved you, Emma. And I'm like, but he hasn't actually fallen in love with this version of this Emma, right? She's different. I don't see him fall in love with her, right? You fell in love with the other woman. They're not the same person. They might be reincarnations, but they're not the same. So I don't like this I've always loved you thing, okay? And also, he's kind of obsessed with figuring out what happened to his great-great-great-grandmother / lover. Present day. He wants to know what happened to her. So I'm just like, to me, he's in love with his great-grandmother. He's not in love with Emma, even though that they're both reincarnates of his grandparents, great-grandparents times 10. I don't fucking know. It was weird, guys. It was weird. I was like, what? Is this Lisa Kleypas? So yeah, I gave this 2.5 stars. Hold on, now I have to check my Airtable. Got a little excited about that. 2.5 stars, that's what I gave it. And this is book 2 in the Stokehurst series. So Emma's dad and stepmom, I believe, have the first book in the Stokehurst series, which I don't know the title of it. I can go get that for you real quick though. Midnight Angel. Midnight Angel is Stokehurst book 1. So yeah, there's that. Then I read Fierce at Heart, which is book 2 in that Zoe York series. This is the firefighter romance. And this is a modern marriage of convenience. Adam, he's the baby brother of the family. He's Owen's youngest brother. And he suddenly makes a life-changing decision that he wants to become a firefighter. Like his father was a firefighter. Owen's pretty much against it, doesn't want his baby brother to be in danger, and I believe that their father actually died in a fire. But he was in the army, and his heroine, Isla, was his former superior in the army. They have a chance meeting years later, and they actually have a one-night stand, and they just say it's for one night, truly. Isla is going through a very messy divorce from a very horrible person. She wants to make a new start. And she ends up by moving to Pine Harbor, basically, because when Adam proposes this crazy scheme of let's get married, first of all, I can do you a solid because there's a bakery that's being sold for $1, but only to Pine Harbor residents because the former owners want to keep it in the small town community and they want the next owners to be somebody that they trust, yada yada. So he's like, let's get married. You can start your bakery here and my brothers will see me as responsible. So like a little bit far-fetched out there, but their romance is a slow burn. It's a friends to lovers romance, forced proximity. They're living with each other. And I think it was really sweet, but I never was as emotionally invested in them as a couple as I was with Owen and Carrie. So it was just an okay book. I didn't mind it, but I just don't think that it was developed very well. And I think it was a little bit, the pacing was a little bit off, being that it was a slow burn because they had already slept together. But I don't feel like she even inserted enough sexual tension during the slow burn. I feel like it was no sexual tension for the longest time, just like ignore it. And they were really just truly friends living with each other. And then we finally get some sexual tension, but the sexual tension is too short-lived until the final resolution of their relationship. So it wasn't that great. So I gave it 3.5 stars. Then I read the next one, which is Wild at Heart. This couple, Will and Katie, they were in the background of books 1 and books 2, and you could tell that there was lots of tension between Katie, who is not only a hairdresser but basically the only realtor in the small town of Pine Harbor. She does both, and she and Will have a lot of tension going on. Will is the principal of the local high school, and they both are in the volunteer search and rescue program. Will has been in it for a long time, for the past couple of years. Katie's a new recruit. She has to go through some training and stuff, and there's also like this competition that they've all entered in for like search and rescue, like team, you know, activity type of thing. Again, another slow burn. I like this one a little bit better. But just not as much as Owen and Carrie's book. I feel like Owen and Carrie's book just like blew me out the water, and these other ones were just okay. But again, another slow burn. I think that Zoe York really takes her time and doesn't jump into this insta-lust, let's jump into bed together and just bang it out. But I will say, in the case of both Wild at Heart and Fierce at Heart, I think that she could have been a little bit faster paced with the romance. And so this one was 3.5 as well. Then I finally made it to, I decided to skip book 3 of the Wedded by Scandal series by Stacey Reed because I wanted to get to the book that everyone loved. When the Earl Met His Match. Very interesting and intriguing opening. So we have our heroine, Phoebe. She is traveling with her family, but she and her maid had taken some air and they'd walked around and they find this dog that kind of looks wolfish. And he doesn't seem very friendly, but Phoebe like wants to try to befriend him. And this Scottish lass happens along and says, oh, he doesn't listen to anybody except his master or whatever, but the master's dying. Phoebe is pretty adamant about like she wants to help him. So this Scottish girl is like, fine, you're a fool, so here you go, here's this letter. Phoebe reads the letter and it's basically like, to whom it may concern. I'm dying and this is my companion, Wolf. I can teach you how to talk with him because he won't respond to his name, Wolf. He needs hand signals, basically. So we get the impression that the owner is mute. Phoebe ends up by taking care of this dog. Months down the line, Phoebe thinks that she's in love with this man. This man was her piano teacher, some sort of instrument teacher. She thinks that she's in love. They have slept together, and then she finds out that she is pregnant. At the same time, she responds to this ad in the paper. This gentleman is looking for a lady, and she takes offense to the way that he is just kind of looking for this perfect specimen of a wife. So she ends up by writing to him, and they exchange letters back and forth during this whole time where she's trying to convince her dad, hey, I want to be with this man, and her dad's like, absolutely not. You're going to be marrying this old geezer of a man who will elevate your status. And the mom's like, you can be happy after he dies, honey. You can marry someone who you want. She's like, no. Anyway, she kind of becomes closer to this man. She kind of starts building a rapport and she respects him a little bit more. So when she's in a bind, she figures out that she is pregnant and she must marry. Her lover has abandoned her and she doesn't know what to do because she doesn't want to marry this old gross guy. So she decides to travel to this gentleman's estate and she meets him, and his name's Hugh, and he is mute. He also happens to be the owner of Wolf, so talk about serendipity. And what makes this plot more interesting is that Hugh needs to marry because his father is dying, ailing and dying, and he's made a promise to his father that he's going to basically reestablish the family in London society. Years ago, they had retreated to their country estate in Scotland because of the rumors that were going around. Hugh's mother was a lot younger than Hugh's father. Hugh's father was obsessed with her. She was beautiful, like one of the most beautiful women of that season. But she was promiscuous. And it's pretty clear. All the siblings look completely different, okay? None of them look like the dad. But the dad still loves Hugh and his younger siblings. The dad's like, after I die, I want you to take your place in society, and you need to have a woman of impeccable reputation and of good family to be able to do this. So you need to marry soon. Here's a list of women or whatever. And then Phoebe shows up on the doorstep. She is the daughter of a duke, so she has like the pedigree, but she's also pregnant. And the dad's just like, no, and like also doesn't want Hugh to marry for love because he married for love and wasn't loved back. So the dad's like, nope, just marry for, you know, mutual gain and no love. The way that this book is done, it's so beautifully written. I love it. I love the way that the friendship develops between Phoebe and Hugh. I love the way that Hugh is just kind of like, he feels this pull towards her. He's in denial that he feels love towards her, but he feels something for her. Decides that, no, this is the person I'm going to marry, even though that the dad's like, please don't, no. I see something in you. I think you could care about her. And he's like, no, it'll be fine. I'll be fine. I'll keep it under control. Sure, Hugh. And the way that Phoebe finds real connection and a sense of family with Hugh's family. So beautiful. There are so many tender, beautiful, loving moments in this book. The way that she immediately wants to learn sign language so that she can talk to Hugh, because initially they have to talk by, you know, writing. He writes to her, and she, funnily enough, she's like, oh, my instinct was to just write you back even though you can hear me, but they kind of write to each other. It's really cute. I will say that the stuff that goes on in the third act, it was a little bit, I didn't really like it. It has something to do with her brother, and her brother wanting to see if she's okay, and so it kind of creates this obstacle between Hugh and Phoebe that I was just like, to me it wasn't necessary, but third act conflict and all that. So I ended up by giving this 4.5 stars, but I think that it was incredibly beautiful. Like, I love this hero. He was one of the swooniest heroes that Stacey Reid has written, like definitely up top tier Stacey Reid hero. Loved Hugh. Loved Phoebe too. Top tier heroine as well. Okay, I have 2 more books. Bear with me. I picked up Silent Lucidity by Tiffany Roberts. This is a sci-fi alien romance. Previously, I had picked this up and basically DNF'd it because I just didn't like it. It was very insta-lust. We have an assassin hero who, and I can't really pronounce his name very well. I don't know how you say it. It's like Tentil or Tentil. I have no idea. And Abella. Abella is this human slave. She was trafficked from Earth, brought to this infinite city, and she is a slave. She's treated like a pet, basically, like she's animal to her owner, abused, and she's a dancer. The hero is an assassin. He has a target, and his assignment is just reconnaissance, but he sees Abella and all that goes out the window. Reconnaissance mission becomes an actual, I'm gonna assassinate the target, but like everyone saw him and he's supposed to be better than this. He's supposed to be invisible. No one's supposed to know that it was him. And it's very public, but he wants Abella, so he steals her. So basically they're on the run the whole time, and he has this reaction to her because she is his mate. But it's so insta-lust and love to me that I didn't love it. It was just, it was okay. But it introduced the hero for the second book. I was definitely more intrigued by the hero from the second book anyway. And that's why I decided to go back to Silent Lucidity, because I was like, I have to read the first book before I read the second book, right? It's just in my nature to read books in order, unless I absolutely can't stand it. I gave it 3.5 stars. And then for my final book in March, the very last day of March, I decided to pick up a contemporary. I saw that Christy was reading The Third Baseman by Lulu Moore on her plane ride to Denver, and I was like, oh, I feel like a contemporary and sports romance. I'm like, yeah, I want to pick that up. I pick it up, but I DNF'd this book. I think I got 25% of the way through this book before I decided if I'm not interested in the characters, I don't like them as individuals, I'm not interested in the backstory because I'll get to that in a minute, the way that the author is just, again, high drama kind of backstory, don't like it. And then I don't like the dialogue or like even the setup of the story 10 years later because it's a second chance romance. I just didn't like it. So I was like, why try to force myself to read something that I'm just really not enjoying? So I decided to DNF it. So the hero and the heroine were high school sweethearts. He's a little bit older than her. He gets drafted to the Dodgers, I believe, which is his dream baseball team. And he decides that he needs to break up with the heroine because he needs to focus on his baseball game. So this heroine who he was in love with and they planned their lives together suddenly decides, according to the prologue, just he doesn't give a reason why. Like, has he always had these thoughts that this was also very temporary for him? Or was this a new thought that somebody put this thought in his head that he couldn't be a baseball player, a famous baseball player with a woman? Someone who he's gonna probably have to have a long distance relationship with? I have no idea. But the prologue is basically him breaking up with her. And he is so harsh when he breaks up with her, basically says, I've never loved you. You're so clingy and needy. Like, I can't have that type of woman. He's so mean to her. And I'm just like, huh, wow. He goes above and beyond to push her away because in his mind, he's just like, if I don't push her away, she's not going to accept no for an answer. And I don't know. I don't like that. So I was just like, oh, you're a dick. And if someone said that to me, I'd be like, fuck you forever. So no. Present day, he has now signed on with this like no-name team because this billionaire has decided to buy this like second-rate team and he wants to build it from the ground up. And one of the things that he had as a part of his contract, as a part of him leaving the Dodgers, his dream team, was that the owner of the team would find a way to hire his ex-girlfriend, who he hasn't seen in like 10 years, 15 years, something like that, hire her. For what position? Make up a position, because she is an astrophysicist who works for NASA, but hire her on to work for a baseball team. It was so weird. It was so weird, man. I don't know. So yeah, the first 25% minus the prologue was her arriving, and apparently probably from book 2, because this is the third book in a series, I guess. From book 2, we actually see their first meeting in real time, but she's just reflecting on the first time I've seen him in years. She ends up by slapping him. So obviously she's not over the breakup. She's very pissed about it still, even though she's been married and she's now divorced. And it's basically just her reflecting on how much he hurt her and how much it kind of, you know, damaged her inside, and how she can't believe that she's still not over it, apparently. And he just like, no, I'm gonna win you back. Like, that is just his mindset. You're here because I want to win you back. I'm gonna win you back. And she's like, no, you're not. Even though she's like kind of horny for him. And he's like, yes, I am. And it was just, I don't know, the way that we have, like, I guess the heroines from books 1 and book 2 show up and immediately befriend her, and she just like dumps all her life story, and she's like, I don't know why I'm telling you all this, but let me keep going. And it was too insta friendship between them as well. Like, I just didn't like the way that it was written. I just did not like the way that it was written. It just didn't make sense to me. So I DNF'd that. And that is all the books that I read during March. So thank you for letting me yap on. This is gonna be an interesting video to try to trim down. But I always manage to do it. I always manage to make these almost 2-hour long reviews, wrap-ups. I always trim them some sort of way because I just talk too much, and it's not necessary to get my point across, but I still talk too much. Anyway, I hope that you enjoyed my wrap-up. Let me know down in the comments down below if you read any of the books that I have read, if you had different opinions about them. I would love to hear them, love to talk about them. If you have any recommendations for me in April, I've kind of like left my April TBR very open for mood reading, so just let me know. If you like this video, give it a big thumbs up, and if you're not already subscribed to my channel, make sure you subscribe to get notified on any future videos that I do. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, life's better with a little HEA. Bye guys.